Thank you for coming to this online webinar about grief from the Wellness Education and Promotion Center at the University of Guelph, located in J.T. Powell. The purpose of this webinar is to learn about grief and how to better take care of yourself while grieving. You may take a break from the webinar at any time and feel free to stop watching if you need to. Student Wellness has a number of supports available if you feel you'd like to speak with someone one-on-one. In this video, we'll be talking about the variety of thoughts and feelings you may have around grief. So what is grief? Grief is not a single feeling, and it's not just a really big version of sad. Often it's a little bit of every feeling. Different losses come with different grief experiences, both in our own internal experience of grief, as well as our comfort sharing that grief with the world. For example, some of you may be grieving the death of a parent, others a sibling, or maybe a friend. For some, the death was expected, and for others, the death was caused by an accident, an illness, suicide, homicide, or addiction. Some may be grieving the person they were closest to in the world, and for others, it may be someone they had a very complicated relationship with, or a relationship that was difficult and challenging. It's also normal to grieve the loss of someone you never met, and the emotions that come about with this type of loss should be acknowledged just like the loss of someone close to you. It's possible that we may have missed mentioning your specific loss experience because there are so many types of losses. It's important to acknowledge that everyone grieves differently, and the way you grieve can change throughout your life. Some of the things we talk about will ring true for you, and others won't, and that's okay. Although each of our losses and grief experiences will be different, there can be a sense of community among those who've experienced a loss. This is particularly true in cases where a death affects an entire community. They get it, in a way that people who haven't been through it just can't. One visualization we're going to use to talk about grief is the idea of the grief iceberg. The surface of the iceberg, the part that everyone else sees, that's the outer world of your grief. But beneath the surface, there's an even larger, deeper part of the iceberg. Things that only you can see, feel, and experience. We're going to talk about both of these parts. The outer world of our grief is the side of our grief that we're comfortable showing the world. There are ways that we'll feel comfortable showing or not showing our grief, and that may change based on who we're with. It may be different if we're with our best friend rather than a classmate. It might depend on the setting. It may be different if we're in class rather than at home. Another important consideration is the fact that we live in a grief-illiterate society. The scripts or messages that people have about grief can stigmatize those who are grieving. People have ideas about how grief should look, so maybe sobbing or anguish, how long it should last, months or years. There are ideas of what's okay to say to someone who's grieving, like they're in a better place now. And there are messages about how we should comfort grieving people, like making them happy again. You might feel these pressures from your family, friends, other people your age, professors, university staff, and very likely yourself. We have a lot of ideas about how it's okay for us to grieve, and it can feel terrible when we feel like we're not doing it right or that we're being judged by others for how we grieve. Many people believe that grief comes in 5 straightforward phases that we go through in order: denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. While some of these emotions will certainly be part of the grief experience, there's no evidence that they're linear or that each of these is experienced by everyone. Here is a list of emotions that one may feel while grieving. Some may ring true to you, and others may surprise you. There may be feelings you've experienced that are not on this list. Some of the emotions that are not typically attributed to grief may be relieved, calm, or happy. But consider the following. Feeling relieved or calm could be because the person that you lost is not in pain anymore. You don't have to worry about losing them, or that you don't have to care for them anymore. Feeling happiness could come from moments of joy, appreciation for life, or recalling happy memories. You may find that you feel guilty about being happy. There's also feeling just fine, and it's normal to feel normal. Active grieving is exhausting, and we can't do it all the time. We need a break from it. Grief can impact many areas of our lives. First is what we feel emotionally, but it also impacts our ability to be productive and how our body feels physically. Most people only emphasize the feelings part, but it's important to look at all the different pieces. This is especially true because if school feels difficult when you're grieving, it can be easy to start criticizing yourself. So why is school so hard right now? Grief changes your brain and the way you think. You may find it hard to focus, making it difficult to complete schoolwork or generally keep track of your responsibilities. For some people, school may not feel hard while grieving. It may feel like one of the easy parts of your life. With that said, you may be feeling some changes in other areas of your life that feel like what we're going to talk about here. So, what are some of the reasons school or other tasks feel so hard? First, it can be harder to focus. You may find your mind wandering to other things, grief-related or otherwise. You could also be having issues with your memory, so you might find yourself being forgetful, not being able to remember old memories as well, not being able to think about good times with the person that you lost, or you may get intense flashbacks or lightning jolts about the way they died. Multitasking and planning is a huge part of schoolwork. Group projects, papers, studying for exams. You may feel overwhelmed and unable to find motivation to start, or you might get sidetracked. You might have different priorities. Some things could feel less important and other things could feel more important than ever. This change could be because the way you feel about things changes, or because you've had to now take on a new role, like as a caregiver. You might be feeling like a different person. Maybe everything feels different. Your ability to do certain things might have changed, if even for a while, and this could challenge your identity. For some, the person who died might have been a huge reason why they were in school. They might have played a big supporting role. Doing it without them can feel really hard. And lastly, you might find yourself seeking out or rediscovering hobbies or creative pursuits. So things like sports, working out, art, guitar, or writing. Try to be kinder to yourself throughout the school year or get extra help if you need it. Consider keeping to-do lists, asking a friend to remind you of deadlines, or asking TAs or professors for consideration. Emotions and grief often manifest in the body. This may be particularly true if we don't acknowledge we're experiencing strong emotions. Emotions want to be noticed, so they'll make themselves known in our bodies if we don't allow them space. Just a side note though, always speak with your doctor about major physical changes you're experiencing, even if you suspect they're grief-related. Grief can cause changes in energy, either more or less. It can feel like one's body is going like a motor, so maybe fidgeting or edginess, or it can lead to feeling exhausted. Grief can create trouble with sleep, being unable to sleep or stay asleep, or sleeping all the time. It can also cause changes to our immune system. When we're stressed, we're more vulnerable to colds, flus, infections. All of this can be part of grief and a stress response. You might also experience changes with your gastrointestinal systems. This might be issues with stomach aches, nausea, acid reflux, diarrhea, or constipation. You might also experience aches and pains, so headache, muscle tension, muscle pain, chest tightness, or generally feeling weighed down. Another possibility is changes in body routines. So specifically appetite and tastes. Maybe food doesn't taste the same anymore. You might find yourself forgetting to eat or drink or being comforted with food or drink. You could also see changes in personal care. So it can feel harder to keep up with brushing your teeth, showering, going to the gym, or you could throw yourself into this as a welcome distraction. Your physical comfort needs may also change. You may have an increased need for physical affection or comfort, or you might not want it at all. Grief can change the way you relate to other people around you. We'll talk about this in more detail in another video. Family dynamics can shift. Someone who was there before might be gone now. Family roles can change. Additionally, people will grieve differently in your family and friend circle, and you may have strong reactions to how they choose to do so. So, for example, posting on social media versus not posting, or talking about the person versus not talking about them. You might find yourself feeling differently about your relationships. You may feel closer than ever to some people, especially those who show up for you, and more distant from others. You might find yourself feeling hurt or angry at those who don't show up in the way that you need. You could also experience changes in how you socialize. Going to parties or out with friends may be very difficult, or it could be a welcome distraction. Same with celebrations or other events. Wanting to talk about your loss all the time because it's your whole world right now is one possible experience, or it being too difficult to talk about it all or not wanting to burden others is another option. This can change over time or with different people and settings. Now, take a moment to think about your own grief iceberg. What do outsiders see, and what are you actually experiencing? Every person has a unique and different experience. However, there are general commonalities between the ways that people grieve. During this webinar, we've talked about some hard things, so let's take some time to look at the takeaway messages. Grief comes in waves. You may have felt a number of different emotions. You may have felt relief, support, or maybe something else. You may not share all aspects of your grief with the people in your life, and that's okay. We live in a grief illiterate society, and not everyone knows how to respond to grief. Despite this, there's no right or wrong way to grieve. While these kinds of emotions can feel heavy, it can also be helpful to acknowledge and create space for them, and to acknowledge that they can manifest in our bodies in a number of ways. I encourage you to watch the rest of our webinars on grief and continue to acknowledge all of the emotions that are part of your personal experience of grief. If you feel that you need more individual support, help's available. This slide contains contact information for wellness services and crisis lines available to University of Guelph students. Feel free to write these down, save them, or screenshot them for later.